Is this on? Hello? Is that good? Can you hear me?
Barely.
Yep. I'll project. How's that? That was a better applause than I expected in Calgary, so thank you. I don't know if any of you remember, but last year there was a screening that was supposed to happen here, and it was canceled due to angry protesters, and a lot of misinformation was spread in the media here about the film by people who had never watched the film. But this is my first time in Calgary, and I'm really happy to be here. So first off, thank you to MESA, the Men's Educational Support Association, for hosting this screening and inviting me to speak, as well as Dr. Warren Farrell. He'll be speaking after my talk and maybe a quick intermission after my talk as well. So thank you all for being here. And by a raise of hands, how many was this your first time watching the film? Wow, I'm shocked. I thought it was mostly going to be people who've seen it online, because it is available worldwide online now. Amazon Prime, iTunes, Hulu. So I do want to be respectful to all of you who are watching this for the first time, because I know it's a lot to take in 2 hours. So I empathize with what you could be experiencing right now. Also, if you haven't seen my TEDx talk online, please, please, please go watch that. It's the most concise, accurate summary of what it was like making this film and the transformation I went through going from being a staunch feminist to finding compassion for men's issues. So please watch my TEDx talk on YouTube. It's called Meeting My Enemies. So I have a few things I want to cover, and if there's time afterwards, I'll open the floor to questions. But I figured it'd be best if I just answer some of the most frequently asked questions that I get. So I'll just jump right in. What was the best part and worst part of making this film? So a few of the best parts were seeing Fred Hayward be reunited with his son. Fred Hayward was the father who went through the long custody battle. Him and his son both went to the LA premiere of the film, and his son is now an adult and very supportive of his father and his father's work in men's issues. Also, another cool thing was last year at a screening, two people met, and a couple weeks ago they got married. So congratulations, Gina and Steven Svoboda. And then probably the best thing that has come out of this film is knowing that it literally saved lives. I've gotten many emails, heart-wrenching emails of people who said that they were contemplating suicide, and the film gave them hope. And on a personal level, the best part of making this film was how it impacted my relationship to my boyfriend, now husband. I really do believe that learning about men's issues made me a more grateful and understanding and appreciative person, and that's an invaluable improvement in my life. So a few of the worst parts of making this film, certainly being censored wasn't fun. The film has been pulled from multiple theaters around the world because of angry protesters. And last year, a screening was canceled. Oh, I just told you about that, so sorry. Okay, and it was actually the person who was interviewed by the media about me in the film was your gender studies professor here at the University of Calgary, Rebecca Sullivan. And I do encourage you to go watch her interview on the CBC, because it is not the film that you just watched, and I don't think she saw the film, but she had a lot of opinions about it. There have been multiple petitions to ban the film from theaters, and even a petition to ban me from ever entering Australia. Luckily that didn't go through. Someone tweeted saying that they hoped a specific screening in Australia would be shot up Batman movie premiere style with dead MRAs. Referring to the 2012 Aurora, Colorado shooting. So the police investigated that. And certainly my name has been smeared in a lot of mainstream outlets that I used to trust. So that's been really disheartening to realize. So another popular question I get is, why did you become a feminist? And were you really a feminist? So I became a feminist late into third wave feminism before fourth wave. So third wave is understood to be the resurgence in the 90s that continued through to the early 2000s. And fourth wave is understood to be the social media wave of feminism that started around 2012. So I became a feminist around 2004, and it was right when feministing.com was founded by Jessica Valenti. Are any of you familiar with Jessica Valenti? Okay. So here's a fun fact. Jessica not only plugged my first feature documentary called Daddy I Do, which was about sex education. She plugged it on feministing.com. But also in 2010, she asked me to send her a personal copy of my film for research that she was doing into purity. So I did. And a year later, she released her own documentary about purity. So for those who are saying, was I really a feminist and how much of a feminist was I? You could say that I was influencing one of the most prominent modern day feminists today. I mean, she has a huge platform, and she's considered me a resource for learning about women's issues. She wasn't the only one. I was also in contact with Amanda Marcotte. Are any of you familiar with her? Another extreme feminist who I adored at the time. And I spent 2 days filming her and driving her around LA for my documentary, Daddy I Do, and she helped promote my film and invited me to speak on her podcast. But now, today, I can't even see what she's up to because she's blocked me from Twitter after the release of the Red Pill. But there was a time that I was supported by the feminist community, and just to rattle off a couple other examples, Planned Parenthood hosted a screening tour of my first film, Daddy I Do, where I flew from state to state with my mother, who was my film producer. And it was a wonderful experience, and my film was used as a conversation starter for the work that Planned Parenthood was doing. And I feel like after making the Red Pill, one of the things I missed the most is having that kind of sisterhood. And I really did get that from feminism, that camaraderie among women. And back when I was a feminist, I believed that its purpose was to lift each other up, offer support and encouragement, and to stand up for women who were experiencing real injustice. And if it's simply that, I still support that. But my beliefs didn't stop there. I did believe in patriarchy theory. I did believe that throughout history, men have oppressed women and that women are subjugated. And I didn't believe that there were any men's issues because they had all the power and privilege. And if there was anything for men to complain about, because they had all the power, then it's their problem to solve. It's not women's problem to solve. So I believed all those things. And so when people ask, was I really a feminist? Yeah, I was a feminist. So why don't I call myself a feminist anymore? And this is probably the most common question I get. What I've now realized is that feminism isn't the movement for gender equality. And I wouldn't even say today that it's a movement for women. I truly believe that feminism is for feminism. It's for an ideology and a belief system that women are oppressed and that men are the oppressors. If feminists were for gender equality and were for women, then I think they would see the value in this film and what I'm doing, and the vast majority of feminists don't support this film or the work that I'm doing. So I did drop the label of feminist for many reasons, and I'm also not a men's rights activist because I don't want either movement to speak for me, and I don't want to speak for them. I have not adopted a new label like egalitarian or humanist, equalist, humanitarian, because right now I don't see the point. And just ask yourself, what is the purpose of labels? I believe the purpose of labels is to have a shorthand method of explaining to someone either what you are, how you vote, or what you believe. For instance, someone saying, I am gay, or I am a Democrat, or I am Christian. But when it comes to an ideology around gender theory, we're not all operating from the same dictionary. So you may have a definition of feminist or MRA in your mind, but that doesn't mean that the person you're talking to has that same definition. So where's the shorthand communication in that? If anything, you're miscommunicating by using a label because you don't know what the other person's definition is. The other night I was talking to my husband about this, and I asked him, do we need labels? And he said, no, they're for people who don't want to have a real conversation. And he's brilliant. And then he paused and continued, or they're for people who haven't done the research and are bandwagoning. So it made me wonder, could Emma Watson have delivered her speech to the United Nations about her He for She campaign without mentioning feminism or proudly identifying herself as a feminist? She had about 12 minutes at the podium of uninterrupted time to speak. Couldn't she have talked about women's issues without trying to evangelize the label of feminist? And then I thought, well, Beyonce in 2014 didn't have any real conversation when she blasted the word feminist in all capital letters on her stage while performing. Just the label itself in bright lights. According to Time magazine, 12 million Americans watched that concert on TV. I wonder how many of them had never even considered calling themselves a feminist before and didn't know anything about the history or goals of the movement, but they saw that Beyonce wears the label proudly. So how many of her fans fit my husband's description of bandwagoning without doing any research? Now, I really want to be clear. I am not trying to diminish or attack anyone who does wear a label proudly. Not at all. Just for myself personally, today, I'd rather have real, long, even conversations and do research rather than letting a label define me or having the mixed definitions of that label define me. But sadly, that won't stop other people from defining me. The media has frequently printed my name as being that I'm an MRA or that I'm alt-right, which I am not. I'm a registered Democrat, and I have been my entire adult life. And I've found that oftentimes what is said about someone is remembered more than what they said about themselves. And that's why my film has been protested and pulled from movie theaters, because the anger has been based on misinformation, based on what other people said about me, but not what I said about myself. Okay, so moving on. This is a fun section. Another frequent question I've been getting a lot recently is what my thoughts are on the METOO movement. I need to take a drink of water for this one. Okay. I feel like I can give a unique perspective since I did live in LA for 5 years pursuing acting. I was a struggling actress from 18 years old to 23. And I did experience inappropriate behavior by producers and directors, unwanted sexual attention, all that. But I first want to illustrate how living in LA and working in the film industry is not your average lifestyle. So let me give you a couple examples to paint a picture of what I saw and experienced in LA. Okay, so one time I went to the Playboy Mansion for what was called the Candyland Party, an annual fundraising event for charity where women were to dress like candy and men were to wear all white. Yes, women were to dress like candy. So how do you do that? Well, I wore a metallic silver lame tube dress that was actually my theater costume back when I played the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz, and platform high heels, hoping that I achieved the look of a candy wrapper. I was about 18 or 19 years old at this point. But when I got to the party, I realized, not a bad thing to realize, but I realized that I was the most dressed woman there. Most of the women, and there were thousands of them, most of them were donning things like candy necklace thongs, whipped creams as bras, body paint, and mostly just lingerie that was a candy theme. So why did I go to the Playboy Mansion? Because I was invited through my talent agency, and I was curious. And that is another thing, that when you're a struggling actress in a talent agency, they get invites to these fancy red carpet events or things like the Playboy Mansion, hoping that young, beautiful women attend these events to make it look more populated with all these beautiful women. So I was curious. And all in all, it turned out to be very safe, and the men were actually, as far as I could tell, were extremely respectful. All the women in what they were wearing or the activity that they're engaging in, as far as I can tell, they were all consenting adults. But it's probably not something that a lot of people outside of LA experience, right? And for those that do experience it, it must give you a different perspective on dating and relationships. I mean, it has to, right, in LA? Because there aren't really any rules, and there's not much that is taboo in LA. And men and women both quickly find out that there's a lot to gain by making connections with powerful and wealthy people. So I have a lot of weird LA stories, and many involving celebrities, which are fun to tell, but I don't have time to share them all today, so I'm just going to kind of jump around. But another weird night was I worked as an atmosphere model, yes, atmosphere model, for Jay-Z's club opening, where there were over 100 of us girls in our early 20s who were hired for $100 an hour to populate the club to make it look, filled with all these beautiful young women. And so the agreement was that we just had to mix and mingle. We had a 4-hour minimum and a 2-drink max. And we weren't supposed to tell anyone that we were hired to be there or anything. So I was playing pool with Charles Barkley, who I guess is a famous basketball player, where he asked me, "Do you like brothers?" And I said, "No, I have 3 sisters." Seconds later, I realized what he meant, but he was already gone talking to A-Rod. But, in hindsight, that was fine. But yeah, so atmosphere modeling is very common. Promotional modeling, grid girls, shot girls, which are girls that promote liquor in clubs. All those entry-level, no education required job positions for women are very alluring to struggling actresses. And the common theme here is that the more beautiful you are, and the more you're willing to use your beauty as a business asset, the more you'll be paid. And that's why female models are paid more than male models. Yeah, there's a wage gap there. So here's another personal example. When I was about 20 years old, I was cast in a low-budget horror film. And at the end of the first day of shooting, the director, who happens to be a woman, she came up to me and said that the producers decided there needed to be nudity in the movie, and the only role that made sense to be nude was my role. Immediately, I had no problem saying, "No, I will not do nudity," because I made a promise to myself I never would. Also, I knew that they couldn't recast me, because if they did, then they'd have to reshoot everything we shot that day, so I had a little bit of leverage there. So the next day, the writers added in a new scene where one of the male characters is caught with a hooker. So they brought in an actress last minute. She was darling and sweet and had no problem doing nudity. And she had just one scene to film where she was topless. And for that one scene, she got paid more than what myself and the other female lead got paid for the entire movie. So I share these stories because I want to show you how LA in the film industry is a completely different world. And the film industry is the wild, wild west. There are no rules. And the line between sex and business is very blurry. And a man can say, "Have sex with me and I'll give you this role," just as much as a woman can say, "If you give me this role, I'll have sex with you." And when you add a lot of money and a lot of fame and a lot of drugs, There are things that people will do that they're not proud of, either situations that they'll stumble into or situations they'll cause. So regarding my thoughts on Me Too, the part of me that cares deeply about justice for women, because I still care about women, even though I care about men's issues as well, it didn't change the fact that I still care about women's issues. So the part of me that cares about justice for women wants to believe that the Me Too movement has helped women find strength to share their sexual assault stories with law officials for due process to take place and find healing through that. But when I look at the Me Too movement and what it has inspired, I don't see healing as the main result. I see it inspiring hatred directed at men in general, and also cruel and degrading treatment of men who have come out with their own Me Too stories. And so much of the dialogue is overtly gendered, saying women are breaking their silence against men's actions, rather than victims calling out perpetrators. And then there's the falsely accused, who should be considered victims as well. Although a false accusation may not physically violate your body like a sexual assault would, a false allegation can make your entire life and life's work crumble before your eyes. Because sometimes an allegation is all it takes to lose your job, to lose your child, and possibly lose your life through suicide. So I'm not going to go into the Asia Argento story because it sounds like there's some new developments happening where she's claiming that the 17-year-old boy that he claimed that she sexually assaulted him, now she's claiming that he sexually attacked her as a 37-year-old woman. And there's a lot to unpack there with what her defense is saying, and we don't have enough time to go through all that, unfortunately. But I would like to end with my thoughts on a headline of one of the mainstream reviews of the film. So this is the LA Times film review of The Red Pill. The headline read, "The red pill only makes worse the divide between men's and women's rights activists." When I first saw this, I had to step back and take a hard look at myself and the film I had created. I wondered, was it really creating more of a divide? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, no, this film is not widening the chasm. I truly believe this film is a worthy step in building a bridge between the sides. And I wish I could ask this LA Times film reviewer, Katie Walsh, to imagine just for 1 second that there are two people who haven't gotten along, and one person has been shouting their grievances, and the other has remained quiet and stoic. If the stoic person all of a sudden started speaking up for themselves and telling the other what they've been experiencing and what hardships they face, would an outside observer look at that situation and think that the stoic person is now creating a more divisive atmosphere by doing that, by speaking up for themselves? I think what they would see is that the division has always been there, and the only way to move towards unity is if both people understand the other's grievances. So does this film make the divide worse? No. When the goal is justice for all, then everyone deserves to be heard. Thank you for listening.